And in today's episode, I welcome Sydney Curtin, a devoted mother, entrepreneur, adoption advocate, and transformational coach who's turned life's challenges into a mission to uplift others. Through her platform, coachcurtin.com, Sydney empowers individuals, especially adoptive families and birth mothers, to navigate complex emotional journeys with authenticity, strength, and compassion. Sydney's personal experiences with adoption, motherhood, and healing fuel her powerful voices in spaces often silenced by stigma. She offers a candid look at the emotional layers of adoption, advocating for ethical practices, open dialogue, and trauma-informed care. Her work bridges personal resilience with purposeful action, inspiring others to rewrite their narratives and lead with heart. Welcome to the show, Sydney. Such an honor to have you here today.
So much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, Sydney, it'd be great. I mean, already just looking at, what you do in helping so many different walks of life. Can you just share with us a bit about your journey as to what led you to the amazing work that you're doing today?
Absolutely. It's such a loaded question because I feel like there's different layers to who I am as a person and different dimensions to my story that led me to advocacy in different ways. And so growing up, dealt with a mom that had a drug addiction and she took her own life when I was 13. I was raised by a single dad for a period of time before he remarried. I've always been the only girl. I have two younger brothers. I dealt with a series of rocky relationships, as most of us do in our adolescence. And it led me to become pregnant when I was 20 years old. And I entered into the world of adoption through a very complex scenario with my pregnancy and the complicated relationship dynamics. What I learned throughout all of that, though, is that the principles about overcoming trauma are the same regardless of what the trauma is that you went through. And so I turned that into my mission to help people find their voice when they feel it's been taken from them and to help them learn how to turn their pain into purpose, regardless of what it is that they've been through. And a lot of it I can relate to for the most part.
Oh, wow. No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. So 20, such a young age to be falling pregnant. And can you remember kind of, what was going on with you back then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in college at the time and very much out to prove that I could do it without anybody's help, and very falsely, I might add. Um, I had turned away from my family in a lot of ways. I was not being responsible with my education and my work, and was in a series of toxic relationships. Based on my upbringing, I really was just looking to prove that I was worthy of love. And I didn't know that at the time, but in hindsight, that's really what it was, is I just wanted to be enough for someone. And come hell or high water, I was going to figure out how to do that. I found myself pregnant after exiting an extremely abusive relationship where the individual that I was with actually ended up in jail for domestic violence against me. And his best friend I had known from college. He was how we were introduced. That should have been my first red flag, but because my prefrontal cortex was not fully developed, and that is what I'm going to blame it on, I went right back to him. And I had known him for several years. He didn't show the same types of red flags that this other relationship had, the one who ended up in jail. And so when I found out I was pregnant, things just started slowly unraveling, where the person that I thought I knew, it turned out I didn't know him at all. And just like me, he bared similar wounds and burdens that he also hadn't resolved from generational trauma. And it resulted in him being extremely dysfunctional, his family being extremely dysfunctional, and therefore our relationship being extremely dysfunctional. When I told my dad I was pregnant, there was no conversation. He said, well, we have to go find an adoption agency. And I just knew abortion was never a thought in my mind. I've always been raised to believe that life has intrinsic value apart from mine. And so I knew that the child that I was carrying was its own being. And I was convicted of that. So abortion wasn't on the table. I also had this very deep rooted desire to raise my child that I was growing and bonded with and loved so dearly. I had taken this to the county that I live in and asked if there was any way that I was able to fight for full custody prior to her being born. Unfortunately, and this is in most counties, you cannot fight for parental rights until the child is born. They explained that to me as there's a small difference in accuracy between an in vitro paternity test or in womb paternity test and after birth paternity test. And so that was their reasoning as to why that wasn't possible. I had determined by this point in time that I didn't feel safe raising my daughter with this individual. So I asked them very candidly, what are my options? And they said, well, you can get an abortion, you can risk it and have her and fight for full custody after she's born here in court, or you could place your child for adoption, which would terminate your rights, but it would also terminate his. And because I was so severely convicted of the potential threat of danger, emotionally, physically, and mentally, that would ultimately impact her upbringing and shape who she was, I didn't want her to have the same traumatic childhood that I had had or that he had had, for that matter. And so I went to an adoption agency. I said, I know nothing about this. I'm not convinced that this is for me yet, but I need you to tell me what I need to know.
Wow. That's a lot to deal with. Bless you. And
Especially
so,
as a 20-year-old.
yeah, exactly. That's
Heavy.
a lot. And plus, at that time, you were also trying to, gain some education as well and trying to, build something of yourself.
Right.
So, yeah. So, what happened then? I mean, in terms of the whole experience with the adoption when the baby was born, how was that? I mean, I could only just think how traumatic of an experience that would have been.
And it's interesting because when I entered into it, like you, I knew that it would be traumatic, and I severely underestimated the detriment and severity of what that trauma would look like.
Mm,
And it's just because hindsight's 2020, right? You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you haven't been exposed to. That's something that you have to learn through experience. And some experiences are more painful to go through. So when you, and now granted, this is going to be different across the United States and the UK and other countries as well. Throughout the states here in America, it's relatively consistent on the process. There are definitely some differences via state laws and agency to agency, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent in the type of practice. So open adoption in concept means that a birth mother, for whatever reason, feels compelled to allow another family to raise her child. Could be my circumstances, could be poverty, could be ton of different things. But that the mother or the natural family is requesting to be involved in the child's upbringing. So that's what open adoption is. And now that ranges on a very extreme scale from semi-open to very open. I have friends that were promised an open adoption and they really only get pictures of their children every once in a blue moon. I also have friends that very literally nanny for their child's adoptive parents so that they can go on a date night and are very active in their child's life. So there's a wide range of what open adoption can look like. Part of the reason that it is so broad and vague all at the same time is because here in the States, I think with the exception of maybe 1 to 2 states, open adoption is not legally binding. What that means in application for natural families is that when you choose to place your child for adoption with a family, you are really taking them in good faith at their word that they will not break the promises that they've made to you, because they could pull that rug at any moment in time and they would have full legal authority to do it. And that is what wasn't fully grasped, I suppose, for me. So growing up, after my mom passed away, self inflicted, as I had mentioned, my dad remarried later, and my stepmom adopted me and my two younger brothers. So I had had experience with adoption in that capacity, not from birth, but I had been adopted. Likewise, my dad's father had left him when he was around 7. He had been adopted by the man that his mother had remarried. Almost the exact same thing happened on my mother's side. So adoption was this word that I heard all of the time circling through my family. but again, just didn't understand the dynamics or the complexity or the legal ramifications of what adoption looked like in this capacity. When you enter into those agencies, what they'll typically do is say, what type of adoption are you looking for? What are your goals? What do you want in a family? And they basically do this personality profiling, if you will. And then from there, they take that series of questions and they match it with families in their area or through their agency that similarly align with what you're looking for out of an adoption. When they came back to me, they came back to me with probably 10 books, and they just put together these books. They're not very long, but it's pictures of their family and why they're looking to adopt and what their family life looks like, where they live, things of that nature. And I remember when I sat down with my social worker that was assigned to my case, and she gave me these books. I flipped through them one by one, and all of the verbiage in these books said, we cannot wait to welcome you cannot wait to welcome a baby into our family, or we cannot wait to welcome our baby home, things of that nature. There was one book in the entire pile, and the verbiage stuck out to me so profoundly. It said, we cannot wait to welcome you and your child into our family. And for that reason, I remember so vividly where I was sitting, what I was wearing, all of it, handing this book to my social worker. And I said, if this family isn't interested, this probably isn't for me. And she scheduled a meeting for coffee. We sat down with this really pathetic get to know you sheet of questions. They were very sweet people on paper. And I never spoke with any other family other than the family that I chose for my daughter.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So it was meant to be. It was meant to be.
You would think, but what ended up happening over time was that sheet of paper that I mentioned that they give you to interview these families, it's things like, where did you grow up? Do you have siblings? What do you do for work? What is your educational background? That very much like, think first date, right? Like, we matched on Tinder and I'm making small talk kind of date. The issue with that is that adoption is really the marriage of two families.
Right.
And so when you think about when you're entering into a marriage of two people, it's very common that people, whether they're religious or not, will do some form of premarital counseling or marriage workbooks where we know as a society, we've sort of identified the main reasons for divorce. And I don't know about the UK, but here in the States, the divorce rates are almost 50%. So only 50% of marriages are lasting through this really complicated relationship that's meant to be for a lifetime, right? Well, the difference between marriage and adoption is that in a marriage, typically it's just two individuals. Now, yes, people get divorced after they have kids, but it was two individuals that entered into this legal contract together. With adoption, from the beginning, there is a child at the heart of this relationship. And what we fail to do as a society is take it with the same level of severity that we do in marriage, if you will. What I did to counter that, and the reason for that, was when I met these people, as I said, they were so sweet. They have biological daughters of their own. So for me, I felt that maybe because they had and raised children that were biologically theirs, they could understand the gravity of the decision that I was having to make to protect my daughter. But it actually turned around and kind of bit me in the butt, where because she had grown and birthed her children of her own, she almost had a more difficult time bonding with my daughter. Now, this is third-party information from the agency, so I'm not speaking on her behalf, but it functioned almost counterintuitively of how I had hoped that it would.
Okay.
Fast forward even further down the line, and we just constantly had discrepancies and gaps in our communication where I wanted them to maintain the promises that they had made to me, and they felt that they were walking on eggshells and obligated to maintain communication with me because of what they had promised. What it boiled down to was that some of the questions that we didn't ask each other were, what are your love languages? What are your conflict resolution styles? What are your preferred methods of communication? what are your love languages? Forget romantically speaking, but just how do you give and receive love to people that you care about in your life?
Yeah.
What is your definition of adoption, and what are you hoping for in an adoption?
Yeah.
What compelled you to seek out adoption, especially because in this case they had 4 biological children of their own.
Yeah.
All of these questions are things that in an intimate relationship with a partner, not specifically regarding children, for example, but just where are we going in life? What are your love languages? Those are things that we would ask a significant other because of how awkward and time restricting and the pressure that's put on both natural families and adoptive families in this dynamic of this relationship, those questions get overlooked.
Mm.
Most people don't even have the mental capacity to know to ask those questions because so many of these families have never been through an adoption. The statistics of women that place a second time after placement is bar none. It's like almost non-existent. It's so rare that mothers will place a child 2 times. I'm convinced that it's because we haven't built the solid foundation for what an adoption should look like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I think, the level of communication required initially, it's not happening. And it is, I mean, from what I know about the whole adoption process in the UK, it's just very regimented and very structured, just form filling. Apparently, there's all these forms, and then social workers just coming to check the environment, but there's no in-depth conversations about, feelings and, yeah, that's unheard of. So yeah, this is very interesting. Mm.
And here in the United States, for every baby, one baby that is looking to be placed, or for one expectant mother that is looking to place her child, there are 40 expectant families.
Wow.
So, just with that train of thought, what would you think that these families that know of this supply and demand issue would say or promise out of emotion, not a heart of dishonesty? But if you've been waiting for so long to adopt a child and you finally sit down with somebody that's expecting and looking to place,
Yeah.
how skewed is your conversation or the reality of what your heart is in adoption going to be?
Oh my goodness. It would be intimate, right? Like you said, it would be exactly like it would be when we're meeting our life partner, because, a child would be for life. Well,
Right?
until they're 18 anyway, but yeah.
It's almost like a job interview too, in the sense that, like, if you have been unemployed, just for the sake of a comparable example, say that you've been unemployed for a couple years
Mm.
and you really need a job. And so when you sit down with that employer that ultimately gets the decision making authority on if you are the individual that will be chosen for this role, you're going to oversell yourself.
Yeah.
And so
True.
you're going to make promises or stretch the truth about experience or what have you. You'll be more bubbly. You'll be more anticipatory about how you approach this conversation because you need this job.
Yeah.
And that is what we experience with a lot of expectant adoptive families too, is that when they sit down with this one birth mother, knowing that there are 39 other families statistically hoping to adopt, I
Okay.
am going to sell myself to you without even realizing it. It's not a negative thing. I'm not saying it that adoptive families are bad. That's just the nature of human psychology when you desire something and know that there is competition for that something that you desire.
Exactly. Yes, I fully agree. I fully agree. Wow. So what's the resolution then?
I guess there's a couple different resolutions. One of them is recognizing that legal changes take a really long time and that there are several steps of approval that we have to go through in order to change legislation itself regarding this topic.
True.
Step number one is going to be coaching people on how to enter this type of relationship with a perspective of humility, openness, and open communication. So, like openness of heart, personality, willingness to accept differences. Some people, the whole saying about opposites attract, you don't have to have the perfect match personality wise for this relationship to necessarily make sense. What you need to agree on is core values, family structure in view of adoption. So, what I did was I wrote a book. The name of the book is Courageous Considerations. And I did write this specifically with the verbiage tailored to an expectant mom reading this book. However, the questions are completely simultaneous to adoptive families or adoptees. So I preface this with saying that if you are an adoptive family or an adoptee or anyone in that adoption triangle, whatever stage of the adoption that you're in, looking to revisit the foundation of your relationship, these questions will still pertain to your situation. It's just slight verbiage change. Instead of tailoring them to the adoptive mom, now I'm tailoring them to the natural mom, for example. When you enter into these interviews, there shouldn't be pressure either way. What natural expectant mothers have to recognize is that because we're the ones that hold the card in the beginning, we have to be willing to meet them with a level of openness and transparency so that adoptive families know that they can meet us with that same level of transparency. Especially, well, I guess there's a couple different reasons. One of them is because once the paperwork is finalized, we now no longer hold any cards. We don't have any authority over decision making. So we really want to have open, honest dialogue and conversation about what this looks like. But the second reason is because as natural families, if we recognize that with every prospective family that we're talking to, whether it's conscious or subconscious, these adoptive families will have in the back of their head, nothing's finalized yet. So it's almost like when you're trying to not get your hopes up about something that you want so much, you almost like lower the expectation gap. You know what I mean? Like you try to set your expectations more realistically so that the disappointment doesn't hurt as badly.
Yeah.
The way that we counter that is by being raw and vulnerable. And that's hard when you're going through this. It just is. Like that's the nature of it. But what in this book, very short, because people don't need a homework assignment when they're going through something this complicated. But I broke questions down into 3 segments. So there's self-reflection, interviews for adoptive families, and everything else. So do you have a birth plan? What types of traditions and special things do you want to carry on for your child? So that would be in segment 3. In segment 1, we first reflect as a natural mother about what are the motives driving us to make this decision. Is there somebody that is influencing me to choose this? Is it my circumstances, whatever have you? And then very similarly, those questions go through a series of chapters related to family, childhood and upbringing, work and employment, long-term goals. We translate that then into family interview questions. And adoptive families should relay these same questions. This is not a one-sided interview. It really isn't. I used the analogy of a job interview just because it's most comparable, but this should be an open conversation. And I want adoptive families asking these same questions in return to birth moms. And it almost is an exchange of power where adoptive families should no longer be looking at this birth mom as, I really hope that she picks us, but instead should be looking at this birth mom is this birth mom the best fit for our hopes and goals for an open adoption?
Yeah, I fully agree. I fully agree. And so what I'm thinking about that is, just how does the birth mom actually manage it once the baby's born and then the baby has to go away? Because it's that bonding, it's the oxytocin, that the hormones that that make us feel that love. And what happens?
I wish that I could explain that effectively, and I'll try, but I don't know that there are words that could be put to this level of grief.
Okay.
And I even compare it to my mom sometimes because there's this concept of the circle of life that we talk about even in like Disney movies, right? You think of Lion King, for example. And what that is that you're born, you grow up, you get married, you raise children, you pass away, and your children repeat this cycle. And it's, that is the cycle of life. When my mother passed away, it was painful because of how young I was, of course, but she had also caused a lot of harm in her drug addiction that definitely took healing. And also, because she was my mother, at some point, based on this ideology of the circle of life being that your parents will pass away before you, there was a part of me that knew that someday that would have happened. I could have hoped that it was under different circumstances. I could have hoped that it was of old age instead of the addiction that she tremendously struggled with. But that was much easier to grasp than losing a child. That disrupts the circle of life that we're using as an analogy here. Losing a child disrupts that because it's supposed to be the other way around. Your children are supposed to lose you at some point in their adulthood or early adulthood, maybe, that you raise them to know how to be self-sufficient and instill these values into them and teach them everything that they need to know and bond with them and have that great relationship. And then time happens and we pass away and our children carry on our legacy. So adoption completely disrupts that cycle where when you lose a child, living or deceased, that is a whole another level of grief that just is almost indescribable. When I got home from the hospital that day, I remember turning to my daughter's dad, my middle daughter's dad. I have a 4-year-old, and he was with me the whole pregnancy. So really, we call him her dad as well. But I remember turning to him and saying, I have to get her back. I can't do this. Like that pit of emptiness that you wake up with is, I couldn't even, I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I felt that way for so long. And even when I had my other 2 children, I really struggled severely with postpartum depression because it was this constant, almost like the wound had just reopened. And it was like, I didn't get to do this for her. You know what I mean?
I get that. Yeah, no, I get that. It is. It's that level of grief. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's undescribable. And I guess, it's only people who have gone through it can really, understand. But no, thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's not easy, but yeah, I really
Well, of course,
appreciate
people need to know. And I mean, like, I've had birth moms reach out to me as a result of hearing these podcasts before, and it's so stigmatized to be a birth mom. So many birth moms are put into this box of poverty or drug addiction or, some sort of addiction and abusive relationships, what have you. 6 months after placement, I owned my own home. I was making 6 figures a year. I had a 0 debt to income ratio. It had nothing to do with my life circumstances and everything to do with the fact that I did not want generational trauma to repeat itself. And at the time, I genuinely believed I was giving her the best start to life that I could. Whether or not that's actually true in application is a different story now today, because if I could take it back, I'd take it back in a heartbeat. But it does not change the fact that she is tremendously loved and that she's safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. I love that. A lot of strength and courage right there. So tell us about your life. Yeah. So what happened then? How did you turn your whole life around?
Well, that was the pivotal moment for me, I think, was her. It was, I remember when my open adoption started spiraling and her adoptive parents started slowly chipping away at the promises they had made. I had just kind of a light bulb moment where I recognized that part of the reason that I had placed, not the whole reason, but part of the reason that I had placed was because I was believing false lies about who I was as a person and what I was capable of. And these were lies that were fed to me from her biological dad and from my family, from my dad, my stepmom, my brothers. I believed that that whole concept of generational trauma was actively repeating itself in me. And I thought strongly that people expected me to become my mom. And for that reason, given what I had gone through with my own biological mother, I was unwilling to put my daughter through that. I was like, if this is true about who I am as a person, then I have to protect her from me as well. That wasn't true. But it took much longer after placement to come to realize that that wasn't true. Step one was learning how to redefine who I was as a person. And for me, that was my faith. I didn't grow up Christian. I actually really strongly rejected it for a long period of time because I was angry that if there was a God, why would all of this crazy stuff happen in my life? Like, how dare you if you love your children so much? And I came to reconciliation with that for a lot of reasons that in and of itself would be an entire episode. So I won't dig into the weeds, but I gave my life to Christ. And every time that anyone in my life said anything about me, if it did not line up with what God said about who I was as his daughter, It was discarded. Like, thank you for your opinion. Thank you. Next, Ariana Grande style. Like, I'm not here for it. I'm not listening to it.
Absolutely.
So
Brilliant.
yeah, it was that self-identification was huge. The
Mm.
second thing was how many people started speaking up about their negative experience with adoption. And when I tied all of the trauma that I had in my childhood with my mom to all of the dysfunction with my family as it was current day and redefining who I was as a person, it almost became okay, if you don't believe me, then watch me.
Mm.
And that was my new fire. So my daughter, I named her. That was one of my stipulations. I am going to name her. If I'm carrying her for 9 months,
Mm.
birthing her, I get to name her. So her name is Emberlyn. I've never said this on a podcast before. You are the first to hear it.
Okay.
So at Emberlyn informally means beautiful firestorm. So embers like ember of a fire, and the name Lynn means beautiful. During my pregnancy with her, my dad used to say, don't make any permanent decisions in the middle of a firestorm. And I never wanted my daughter to think that she was a product of a mistake. So I named her Beautiful Firestorm. And I made a promise to her that come hell or high water, even if I made a mistake in placement, this will not be for nothing. I will make change. And I've carried that vow for her ever since. Even in the children that I raise now, I have two in my home. And I love those babies to pieces because I didn't get to give my oldest daughter that. And one day I pray that I'll be able to. And I
Mm.
pray that she'll hear that story. I would never talk poorly about her adoptive family, just for the record, but she'll know the truth about what I agreed to versus what happened in reality. And she'll be allowed to make those decisions and discernments on her own.
Mm.
But she
Definitely.
always has a space here, even down to the fact that for her whole life, I have always bought a house with an empty room so that if anything were to happen and she needed to come home, that she has a space here.
Oh, wow, that's so touching. That is amazing. Oh my goodness. It's that soulful connection,
It's that mama bond. You know, you have babies.
it's
It's
the
the same
mama
thing
bond.
like at the park, you hear your child's voice amongst 25 other kids,
Yes.
right? You can feel it, you can hear, and the cries too. Moms talk about this all the time. Like when you hear your baby cry, no matter where you are or how many other things are going around, you know what your baby sounds like.
Exactly. It is, yeah. Oh wow, I love that. And so how did you navigate the crazy relationships and the dynamics?
Family or just in general?
Yeah, I guess like probably partners and
Yeah.
mm,
So that still took a lot of healing because, so to this day, when I terminated my rights to therefore also terminate her biological father's rights,
mm,
him and I haven't really spoke since then. We've touched base a couple times. I don't really know where he is or what he's doing, and I don't really care because even though it wasn't his fault directly, it
mm,
was both of us, right? Like takes two to tango, no dismissal of accountability here.
good,
But
good.
he really put me in a compromising situation. He
Mm,
was older than I was. And just in hindsight, if my son had put any woman in the position that he had put me in, I mean, I'd have my son's head. Like we'd be doing some serious work if this
yeah.
was reversed. And I just felt like his family was equally villainizing me for the decisions that I was making. And nobody except for me and a handful of other people that knew me really well recognized that Sydney wants to raise her child. Like this is a genuine sacrifice. It's not fear. It's not her trying to dismiss responsibility. It's that she genuinely at her heart believes this is what's best for her daughter. So the people that went through that with me are the people that are still in my life today. And it eliminated a lot of people. And I'm okay with that.
Mm,
It took a long time too to repair the relationship with my dad. To
mm,
this day, he won't take accountability for the fact that he really, in a lot of ways, coerced me to choose adoption. And it doesn't mean that I still wouldn't have chose it necessarily. And I'm not saying that he is solely responsible, but when my mom passed away, with my only living parent being my dad, and having two younger brothers, I strongly leaned on his words for approval, for direction, especially as a 20-year-old, having recently moved out, working a job, going to college. I mean, at that stage in life, you call your parents for everything. Like, how do I register my car? What do I need to do at the DMV? Like, all of these little mundane things, it's mom or dad that you call. Well, dad was all that I had. So when dad was saying these things about me, it made it really, really hard to discern what was true versus what was his fear
Mm.
speaking into this situation. And
Very.
it was only after having my other two children that I was able to let go of that anger towards him. Because as parents, and I understand this now that I raise my children in my home, but sometimes we respond in anger to fear,
Mm.
where when we're afraid of something, the immediate response is a secondary emotion, that secondary emotion being anger. I'm not angry at you, but I'm reacting in anger because I am afraid that you're going to hurt yourself, or I'm afraid that you are going to do something that, or sadness too, is another common primary emotion within that. And so it took a lot of unraveling to release all of that,
Mm.
to be willing to take accountability where accountability was due, and to forgive people for what they didn't know any better either. I mean, even though I was the one that suffered the consequences, they didn't have any real experience with adoption either. It was really, this was the first big one.
It is, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so, what message would you give to somebody who may be struggling right now with shame or grief or just the feeling of being stuck?
You are not what you've done,
Mm.
you are what you make of it.
Mm.
And you do not have to choose to live in those emotions. Emotions are liars more often than not. It doesn't take away the validity of them, but they're oftentimes not rooted in truth. They're rooted in something that someone else or something else wants us to believe about ourselves to hinder our full potential. And the minute that you recognize that those chains aren't actually bound to anything and that you can actually just take them off because they were never locked, you can turn the trajectory of your entire life around.
Mm. Beautiful. I love that. Wow. And what's the most rewarding aspect of the work that you do right now?
Mm. Right now, it is creating financial freedom to
Mm.
be able to afford the time to change those laws that I was saying. It takes a lot more time to change that legal aspect of it. If
Mm.
it were not for my businesses, I wouldn't have the capacity financially to dedicate all of my time to reformation in this world.
Mm.
And one of the podcasts that I did recently was with some MTV stars, which is out here in New York, Ty and Kate from Teen Mom. And they entered into an adoption that didn't go the way that they had planned either. And I met with them. And so now we have some really big hopes and aspirations for what we can do in the adoption industry together.
Oh.
But it's been the network and my line of work and my commitment to it has created the freedom to be able to go actually now go get these things done.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. And you are doing a lot. You're a very busy mum.
That's the truth.
How do you manage the time?
Man, I think my son's dad would tell you that I don't. I think he'd be like, whatever she says is a lie. She doesn't manage her time.
I get that.
um,
I get that.
yeah, again, it comes back to that ability to have the financial freedom, like owning my own businesses, and having a business partner in one of the businesses that I own. They all know my heart and they all know what my long-term goals are. And so as long as I stay true to my word and follow through on the commitments that I do offer to them, everyone is so understanding about what my long-term vision is. And so I think that it's that communication part, honestly. If you communicate, regardless of how busy your schedule is, this
Mm.
is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going, then you don't feel the need to justify your time sacrifices anymore. For a long time, I did that. When I was W-2, I constantly found myself justifying why I needed the day off or what I was doing, whether it was for sick kids or whatnot. I hated having to explain to my employer, well,
Mm.
I need the day off because daycare won't watch my kid when she has a 101-degree fever. I
Yeah.
don't report to anybody now. I
Mm.
communicate to the people that I have respect for, that I have partnered with in business, but
Mm.
my time can no longer be bought.
Wow, that's powerful. Really powerful. Yeah. Beautiful. And so where can people find you and connect with you and work with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, www.coachcurtin.com. And my social media handle is the same on Instagram and TikTok. So that would be coach underscore Sydney Curtin.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, and I will be adding all the links in this episode.
Thank
Sydney, it's
you.
been such a pleasure talking with you on this real compelling and emotive episode. Today, I must admit, I had tingles down my spine with some
Oh,
of the things you were saying because I could really relate, to the, just what you went through, just such an emotional time, and so many other, adoptees out there as well, or even moms who are thinking about adoption. Then it's a transition. So, I just believe that everybody needs support during any transition because it's hard to do it alone. So, yeah, if you're out there right now struggling, then please do reach out to Sydney. I'm sure Sydney would be honored to hear from you and to support
love to
you.
talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good to speak with people who have been through the journey themselves, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was such a joy.
It was, yeah. Thank you. Lovely. And so, yeah, that's all we have time for today, my beautiful people. Hope you found today's episode valuable. And please do reach out if there's any questions about anything that we discussed. And it's always an honor to hear from you all. Until the next episode, take care, my friends.